The Crucial P5 Plus has been launched a few years now, and ever since its debut, it was a viable option for gaming PCs as well as workstations, mainly thanks to its competitive pricing, the usage of micro memory chips and dedicated 1GB DRAM cache. And now that we are at the beginning of 2024, is this M.2 SSD still a good option for today's demands? In this review, we shall see just that. The Crucial P5 Plus is a PCIe 4.0 SSD that sports micron-made memory, DRAM cache, and a simple design. Unfortunately, these SSDs have only a few variants in terms of storage: 500GB, 1TB and 2TB. No 4TB unfortunately. In this review, we have the 1TB variant of the P5 Plus SSD, which can be had for around $90 US, at least at the time of this review. For this price, you do get a lot for your money: 1TB of storage, DRAM cache and micron flash chips, just to name a few, but more on those later on. From a design standpoint, this M.2 SSD is simple. It has an all-black PCB, a black label, and that's about it. I mean, even the specification label is all black with white text, and credit where credit is due, this attention to detail is to be appreciated, especially for an SSD at this price point. The highlights of this SSD is the controller used. It's an in-house designed Micron 8-channel flash controller with the model number DM02A1. This new controller brings out support for PCI Express 4.0 SLC and TLC cache systems, among other things that have yet to be revealed by the manufacturer. Speaking of the controller and what PCI Express interface it supports, the Crucial P5 Plus is running on PCI Express 4.0x4 interface, but it is backward compatible with pretty much everything in terms of PCI Express interfaces. While other M.2 SSDs of newer generation have a double-sided PCB design, the P5 Plus has a single-side design. This means that all components of the SSD, the controller, memory chips, DRAM cache, chip and so on, are installed on the same side of the PCB. The good thing with this type of design is that you can get better cooling on the SSD and its components, as everything is on the same side, and thus you only need to use a single part heatsink and not a double one. For memory storage, this SSD uses two micron-made 176-layer 3D TLC 9 memory chips, and these have the model number IRE2D-NY124. And finally, the P5 Plus has a single LPDDR4 RAM chip with a total storage capacity of 1GB. This is the cache system of the SSD, and the RAM is running at 4266 MHz by default. This too is a micron chip and has the model number D8BMZ. To test the new M.2 SSDs, we have upgraded our testing platform to fully take advantage of the latest PCIe interface, and thus we are using a Z7090 motherboard from BioStar, an RTX 3090 Super graphics card from MSI, and an Intel i7 13700K CPU. The first test is a real-world test that involves copying large files from one folder to the next one, on the same drive. This way we get a good idea of the performance of the SSD without any external factors. The size of the cache and how the SSD performs once the cache has been filled is also tested within this benchmark. First, we will copy the folder that contains 100GB of data and essentially create a duplicate. And here you can see that the SSD is performing well, at first anyway, with a starting speed of well over 6GB per second, and then the speed drops to 3GB per second and then 2GB per second, where it stays for a few more seconds. Then the speed will drop to close to 200 MB per second and jump back up to 1.5 to 1.7 GB per second and sometimes 2 GB per second as well. This is what you can expect once the cache of the SSD is filling up. The speed drops, then the cache empties, then the speed jumps back again. It's a useful system and it works in this case. What we can gather from this simple test is that with the Crucial P5 Plus, it would be better to keep the file transfers at under 80 GB in total size. I'd recommend you to keep your file transfers and file copy tasks as around 40 to 50 GB per transfer to get the best speed possible. And when we compare this SSD to others, we can also see how much better the P5 Plus is when compared with the older P5 SSD, no less than 370 MB per second of file transfer differences between the two. The first synthetic test is Crystal Disk Mark, a popular benchmark that is being used to test everything from SSDs, hard drives, USB flash drives and so on. And in this test, the Crucial P5 Plus is on the second position in our graph, right behind the Silicon Power XS 71TB and ahead of the Silicon Power US 71TB. And this is the case for both the reads and the writing tests. The next test is Auto Disk Benchmark, another popular benchmark that has been widely used by everyone and has proven to be reliable. The major differences with this benchmark is the fact that it uses multiple size files to test the SSDs, and a lot of them. And here the P5 Plus 1TB drops in the charts, mainly because this chart is focused on small size files and thus some SSDs will perform worse. This is the case for both the reads and the writes. The final test is a video game loading test, and the game we are using is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a game that has proven to be reliable and easy to use and time when loading its levels. And here the crucial P5 Plus is on the second position, right behind the Silicon Power XX70 1TB and ahead of the original crucial P5 1TB. The temperature of this SSD are impressively low, as this drive did not hit the thermal throttle point at all while testing it, not even after hours of intensive usage. And keep in mind, this was all done without the usage of a heatsink or some special metallic label to dissipate some of the heat. When looking at the crucial P5 Plus SSD, especially the 1TB variant that we have in this review, it's hard to place it somewhere on the rankings. On one hand, this SSD is performing well for what it is, but some PCIe 4.0 SSDs are performing better and are not more expensive. The performance is good mostly because this SSD uses brand new components. The new 8-channel DM02A1 controller, the new B47R 176-layer flash memory chips, and of course a DRAM cache chip. This drive performs well in some tasks and average in others, and this is where improvements will be made with the next generation of SSDs more than likely. While in some synthetic benchmarks the P5 Plus did not perform as well as you'd expect, in the real-world testing the SSD did very well, especially in file copy tests, but also in video game loading level testing. And in the end, that is what matters for the end user, not arbitrary numbers we get from a benchmark. For a price of $90 or so US, you cannot really go wrong with this SSD. Even though there are better models out there, the crucial P5 Plus is still a good choice for a gaming or even a workstation system. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you'll find the links for both the Patreon and Subscriber Star pages of this channel.